Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into TikTok. You know, the social media giant with over 1 billion users that somehow found itself right in the middle of a massive global security debate.
So, let's get right to it. With all this insane popularity, why are governments from Washington to Brussels talking about banning TikTok altogether? What's the actual threat here that has lawmakers so spooked?
I mean, the app's rise has been just meteoric, but it's been shadowed by this constant storm of allegations, right? And that's led to some pretty high-stakes stuff, from its CEO being grilled in congressional hearings to outright bans on government phones.
So these are the big, scary headlines you always hear. The story is that TikTok is basically a Trojan horse, a tool for spying, for pushing propaganda, and for stealing huge amounts of our data. It's all framed as this direct threat to national security. But, the real question is, where's the actual proof?
Okay, so let's put on our investigator hats for a minute. In this section, we're going to try and assess the real risks by just taking these accusations apart one by one and seeing what the evidence actually says.
Let's kick things off with the biggest fear of them all, the idea that this app is directly controlled by the Chinese government, acting as its spy agency all around the world.
But when you actually pull back the curtain and look at the corporate structure, the picture gets, well, a lot murkier. TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, isn't some state-owned enterprise. It's actually incorporated in the Cayman Islands, and it's backed by huge global investors like SoftBank and Sequoia Capital. It was really designed to be a global company from day one.
Now, you've probably heard about the Chinese government taking a 1% golden share in ByteDance. And yeah, that's true, but the distinction here is absolutely critical. That share is in a domestic Chinese subsidiary, the one that runs China-only apps like Douyin. It has zero ownership or say in the global TikTok app, which, by the way, you can't even get in China.
Okay, fine. So what about the data collection? Let's tackle that next. Is TikTok's data harvesting really so uniquely invasive and dangerous compared to all the other apps on your phone?
Well, the data itself tells a really interesting story. Look, TikTok absolutely collects a lot of your information. There's no question about that. But its practices aren't really an outlier. As you can see from this chart, what it collects is pretty comparable to its main rivals. Some studies even show it collects fewer specific data points than a behemoth like Facebook.
So if it's not the data collection itself, then what is the actual tangible threat? Well, security experts point to something completely different: the software supply chain. The real risk, they say, is that malicious code, malware, could get secretly injected into the app through a future update with no real guarantee anyone would even catch it.
So, if the evidence for direct spying is, let's say, weak, what's really driving all this conflict? Well, this is where we have to zoom out and look at the much bigger picture, this whole geopolitical game that's being played out, kind of like a new digital Cold War.
This quote really gets to the heart of it. A lot of research suggests this whole fight over TikTok isn't really about your privacy or your ad profile. It's about a fierce, zero-sum competition between the US and China for the raw material, these massive data sets that you need to dominate the next generation of military AI.
This table really breaks it down perfectly. You have two totally different ways of looking at this whole thing. On one side, there's the consumer privacy view. The problem is just an app collecting our data for ads, and the fear is losing our privacy. But then, there's the geopolitical view. And from that angle, the problem is a rival nation controlling a huge data set, which is now a resource for a military AI arms race. The fear isn't just about your data anymore. It's about losing a global tech war.
So, given how complicated this is, an outright ban feels like a pretty blunt instrument, right? So what are the other options? We're basically at a fork in the road now, with governments starting to think about targeted regulation instead of just restriction.
And we're seeing two very different playbooks emerge. Over in Europe, the focus is on broad regulations that apply to all the big tech platforms, no matter where they're from. But in the US, the strategy is way more targeted, using specific government bodies that review foreign investments, like CFIUS, to put just one company under a microscope.
Let's just break down the EU's approach for a sec. It's called the Digital Services Act, or DSA. This law basically creates a rulebook for any very large online platform. It forces them to deal with risks like disinformation, makes them open up their secret algorithms for review, and it backs it all up with massive fines for not complying. It's a way of tackling that propaganda risk across the entire industry.
Now, the US alternative is pretty different. It's more pragmatic, and it neatly sidesteps all the free speech issues that come with a ban. It basically uses TikTok's ambition to go public on Wall Street as leverage. It lets the Committee on Foreign Investment step in and impose super strict security conditions, like forcing independent oversight of its software, which gets right at that key malware risk we talked about earlier.
At the end of the day, this whole debate is about so much more than just one app. As we start to wrap this up, it's pretty clear that the TikTok dilemma is really forcing us to ask a much bigger question about the entire future of the internet.
So here's the crucial point. Singling out one app, whether it's TikTok today or some other app tomorrow, doesn't actually solve the fundamental problem. We've got this global internet, but we have no global rules for how data should flow across borders, especially when those borders are between powerful rivals.
And that leaves us with the final, and let's be honest, pretty provocative question. In this new era of digital empires, where tech and data are the main battleground for power, who gets to write the rules for the global internet? And can we even create a shared set of rules before the whole thing just splinters for good?